Hello, everybody.
Hello. How's everyone doing on a Monday evening?
Oh, it feels like summer
Yes, it
in
does.
my neck of the woods.
Same
Does feel
here.
like summer. Good times. Good times.
Very
Good
good
to see
time.
you. Sir.
Good seeing you, Josh. And
We,
hopefully we have some fun things to talk about for people.
I think so. I'm and we were talking, and one of my favorite jokes, and it is a joke when somebody asks me something, or they say, "I have a question for you," and I'm like, "Well, you know, uh, don't worry. What I don't know, I'll just make up." But that is a joke. I think that is an important factor, and something that you and I do strive to do is know what it is that we're talking about, or simply say, "I don't know right now, but we'll find out."
Exactly. And we've done that already multiple times on
Yeah,
this. So,
yeah,
people
yeah.
asking questions.
There's just there's it is genuinely fun to joke about, and for people who know me, I have kind of a twisted sense of humor to begin with, but I think it comes with the job. But it it is, from your position in law, my position in journalism, and then our background as historic writers, it is being able to say what is objective data, um, what is it that we can reasonably conjecture, what is it that people are anecdotally sharing, and what is perhaps sort of fringe folklore or urban legend. And I personally think it's all valuable to the larger dialogue.
I do
uh,
too.
it's all what makes up our culture,
Hmm.
all of what makes up our lore and our history, and what makes a place a place. And I don't have an issue with any of that. I think that is just very important to keep things properly and clearly categorized so people know exactly what they're dealing with.
Right. Exactly. So that someone isn't uh, mistaking a legend for fact, vice versa. So,
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes, I mean, and we've covered some, and I'll be the first one, and I love the story. It is phenomenal. It's not our topic stories, um, but the Virgin Bluff, the Indian maiden leaping to her death. I think it is highly anglicized.
hmm.
I think it is a settler myth, but rather than degrade it for not being accurate, no, it's not accurate. For it is not accurate in terms of history of actual something happening in Native America, but it is actual folklore for later settlers. And that's true. You just
Hmm.
have to understand context.
Exactly. And given that, let's wade into haunted theaters.
and and starting with one of our favorite haunted theaters,
Yes.
which we will be at the end of the month. And as it is now June, I can say at the end of the month,
Yeah.
we will we will be at the incredible Coleman Theater on June 27th in Miami, Oklahoma. It is right, and we talked about this last time, and it's right in that borderland space as the Ozarks, the ruggedness of the Ozarks gives way to the Great Plains as it starts stretching out into Oklahoma and Kansas. An incredible space, an incredible liminal space, and the theater itself is also an incredible liminal space. So
Yeah.
huge invitation to anybody watching this. Make plans June 27th at the Coleman Theater, and scope that out. And where do they find more information for that, Lisa?
The Coleman Theater website. Tickets are supposed to go up today or tomorrow to purchase. You can purchase them the day of the event as well. If you actually, the event is actually on the Dark Ozarks page as well, in a post.
Awesome. Yes. And
And the schedule's in there too.
yeah. And what was I going to say? I you could very easily say, Josh, why don't you know what it is? Well, I'm part of the deal. I don't pay attention to tickets for this event.
Well, with this, the Coleman takes care of tickets, so I don't pay as much attention to that as well. So, we've had a couple of people asking, about it, and my understanding is tickets are supposed to be up, today or tomorrow on their website. If not, just check back because they're getting them up, and everyone's excited. I guess just to set the scene for people, the Coleman was built in 1929. It is just a phenomenal building. It's Baroque Spanish on the outside, and it sits right on Route 66. You drive down, and it's like, wow, the last thing you expect in downtown Miami, Oklahoma. Absolutely gorgeous. And then the even better surprise is when you walk in, and if that wasn't fabulous enough, they decide, and we got bored with Baroque Spanish, so it's based on Versailles.
Oh my gosh, I know. It is it is genuinely one of the most beautiful interior spaces of the Ozarks, certainly of the region, not just limited to the Ozarks, but I would say, a tri-state region. It is a jewel. And
it really is.
I got to go into the Coleman the first time, actually before you and I met, before we started working together. I got to see the Osage Ballet that
cool.
was performing there, and incredible production. And it was, I think there are a lot of standout moments about the theater. But the chandelier, I think, it takes the cake. I have no idea how massive is that. It's bigger than my house.
I'm not sure what the dimensions are, but I think they've told me that it weighs over 800 pounds.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt about that. If that thing fell, it would talk about a crash.
It would, that would be devastating.
Well, and you have to, Mr. Coleman had made a fortune in the mining in the area. He owned a hotel across the street, and basically he built the theater because his wife was bored. She didn't have anything to do in Miami. They also had a home out in LA. They hobnobbed with stars and so on and so forth. The Brat Pack and so forth were friends of their kids. And here they were in Miami. So she was bored. So he built her a theater. He built her a theater that would attract world-class performances as well as movies. And it did. Everyone from Elvis to Frank Sinatra to whoever had performed there. And even more interesting is even before that building, there was it was originally the courthouse and the gallows back in the 1800s.
Yes.
Then that building was torn down. Another building was built that housed, among other things, a funeral home and a morgue. And that building caught fire. But the basement is still the same basement and has the same foundation walls as the prior building.
Right.
And basically it caught fire. Mr. Coleman bought the land and basically just pushed it all in. And then it sat there for a few years, and then he built the theater.
Right.
And there are a number of personal experiences and things that do happen there. People see performers on stage. Sometimes they see someone, looks like someone sticking their head out behind the curtain at the edge, like either someone working behind stage or a performer seeing what's going on. Woman is seen and heard in the balcony, and she'll sit in the same seat and cry.
Oh, wow.
And is heard sobbing. And it's reputed that she is a young woman that worked for some of the contractors building the theater, and she fell in love with one of the workers. And basically we had the tragic story of, we're not really sure what happened to him, but she either some stories are that they didn't know what happened to her, she just disappeared. Other stories are that she did die in the theater, but they don't know how. Not confirmed, but we do know that she did work there. And she supposedly has been seen almost since the time it opened.
Wow. And it
there's
something.
A little,
oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, and there's a little boy in the basement too, that people will run into and he interacts with, and no one really knows where he came from or what time period really.
Right. And something that you hinted at that is part of the potential paranormal activity is the layers that it could be that the haunting may be attached to the location, which several things had happened that predated the Coleman. So the Coleman literally could have been haunted from the first day that it opened.
Literally. In fact, the ballroom is a good example of what seems to go on there. Probably predates the theater itself. A shadow man's been seen in there that looks like he's wearing 1800s cowboy hat, and so he may be from either the time of the jail or at least the prior building. It's also at one point that area was a Freemason temple. And I can say personally that I was sitting at the table one day, and my son Benton was there, Shannon was there, the manager, and we were discussing different things. And we were actually going over, we had done an investigation recently, and we were going over evidence that we found. And all of a sudden, and it was set up with tables and everything for dinner. And about 2 tables behind us, all of a sudden, we all heard the chair being scooted back. And we all stopped and turned around, and the chair was away from the table. And we all looked at each other, no one had come in or out. So there you go. And then right in front of that doorway, though, on the mezzanine is where they hear, sounds like a singer warming up her voice.
Right. And of course, I'm going to ask for a clarification for this from you. One of the things I seem to remember is that there's one particular room that tends to, I think, high up in the building, that seems to be associated with a little bit more darker activity.
Yes, the third floor dressing room.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple dressing rooms on different floors, but the third floor, no one really knows why, but that space seems to, it's always very heavy. And it's that space that people have gotten things like a very stern get out,
Mm-hmm.
where they do feel like something did not want them there.
Yeah.
Even employees of the building.
Right. Right. And that is something coming back to some of our personal experience, that a lot of times the energy in a place will, for lack of a better word, will warm up to regulars as
Right.
the sort of the energy begins to understand that, you know, you're not there for, and you know, you think about the you think about the funny, you know, it's about perspective. We're always, you know, especially when you know, begin talking about, you know, paranormal activity in locations. Oh, is it friendly? Is it malevolent? What is its intention? Realizing that in many of these cases, the quote unquote paranormal activity in question is trying to figure that out about us.
That's true. That's true. It's because, you know, suddenly someone sort of invaded their space,
Yes.
you know, because
And you know, it's like, I mean, it's like if I was in my living room and suddenly there were other people there.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm not happy about that.
Exactly. And that, you know, that certainly can happen. Um, Another area in that building that has a lot of activity is actually the green room. And
Yes.
the green room, and it's actually under the stage. And there's a lot of experiences there, often feeling of foreboding as you're going down into it. People, I, I've, I felt heaviness on the stairs, but there are people who've even worked there that say, you know, they've started down and they just felt like, nope, and go back up, and they'll come back later. Uh, People have talked about seeing a performer, it looked like a dancer in that room,
Hmm.
things like that. I've never felt uncomfortable in the room itself. On the stairs, it can feel heavy. I'm not really sure why. Um, but I can tell you that I've had one of my probably most, I don't want to say intense, but very clear experiences of a disembodied voice in that building. Um, Went in one day actually to talk to the manager, and they were closed that day. So there were three of us in the building. That was it, and we were standing in the lobby, kind of in front of the theater doors, and the telephone starts ringing. And the manager's office was on the mezzanine upstairs, so the phone's ringing up there, and but since they were closed, he decided to let it go to voicemail since we're standing there talking. And on the third ring, very clearly, very booming loud, you hear a male voice that says, "Answer the phone." To the point, he turned around and looked at me and looked at the other person. Did you hear that? Yeah. And to the point that he thought one of his employees had come in the back door and was playing a trick on him. He went through
Wow.
the entire building, everything's locked up, no one's there. And my guess, it was probably Mr. Coleman.
Hmm.
And people have had experiences seeing a man that at a glance that looks like Mr. Coleman. His portrait's in the lobby.
Hmm. And I think one of the I think an important thing to kind of talk about just was we're talking about paranormal, pardon me, activity and possible locations. After our discussion of the Ritchie Mansion, we had an individual who said it's not haunted. I've been there lots and lots of times.
Right.
And as an example, just thinking about this, talking about the basement in the Coleman. I've been in the basement now multiple times. Have never experienced anything. If I didn't know that there was, reports, I would be like, it's a basement. That's it.
Right. And to be honest, I would too, to a large degree. I haven't really had that much experience myself. However, I have seen another actually fairly seasoned paranormal investigator that just on turn of a dime had a very intense negative experience, turned around and walked out of the building.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were several of us standing there, and we were all surprised because it was out of character.
Right. Exactly.
None of the rest of us had an experience, but I can't say that he didn't. And that's the thing, is just because someone hasn't had an experience doesn't mean someone else didn't.
I know. And, and I know the location is not part of our topic tonight, but in terms of relating my personal experiences at the Crescent Hotel, I've been to the Crescent Hotel many, many, many times now, over, a number of years, 12 years. And I love the Crescent. I really do. That said, very first time that I went in, had an extraordinarily uncomfortable experience. I encountered something of a very high degree of malevolence. It did not want me in that spot, and I honored its wishes and I left. I've been back countless times. I've been back a lot, several times a year. We could figure it out, but I've been back probably 2 to 3 times a year over the last 12 years. Have not had any experience that ever came anywhere near close to that. That does not say that did not negate the first experience.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that I think, well, there's good and bad from all the reality TV shows on ghost hunting. And one thing I think that does seem to be portrayed is that things happen on cue.
Yes.
Because it's usually portrayed that, oh, this was all done in one evening. We were here 5 hours and all this happened. So people get the idea that, and that must happen every day. Well, it doesn't. And even when they film, usually they're there somewhere between 7 and 10 days at a location to get what they do. And so it's a command performance is not something that can be expected. So anywhere.
And I would, depending on how you choose to parse out the potentiality of paranormal activity, if it is the spirits who are formerly human beings who are alive, to somehow just what's the word for it, and just expect other people to respond on cue would be inappropriate.
Well, yes, and certainly it's not robotic or something, and so most people don't respond on cue anyway very well. Brought it, so at least I know I don't. So.
And I don't either. So, and of course, it's right there. Coming back to the Coleman. The Coleman is on Old Route 66. Definitely an incredible landmark along the way. And there is another theater on Route 66 that is also reported to be haunted, and it is a beautiful and historic theater in Springfield.
Yes, the Galois. It is
Oh,
definitely,
love the Galois.
and I remember when it was empty, and it stood empty for a very long
Yeah,
time, and remember going by and always thinking, boy, I wish that someone would do something, and they restored it. It's beautiful, and it's a working theater again.
it
And
is. It's incredible. And on Olive Street, right? I think present day Olive Street,
I believe
or
so. Yeah,
just off of
so
Olive Street is the alley, or the street behind it. And I
right.
know that because that's where I park.
But and it was built, I think, just a couple of years before the Coleman. I think
24.
24.
24, yeah.
Yeah. So same time period, and it was sort of like the Coleman. It was a sort of the hybrid. You had live performances, you had vaudeville, you had this and that, and then you had film. And over time, it became more
Yes.
of a film theater until it closed in the early '80s, I believe,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
it was
Very,
restored.
very early 80s.
Yeah, and because after that, living there, I remember it being empty and looking, pretty forlorn for a while. But it has its
And in a number, I was going to say a lot of, for a period of time, a number of homeless in Springfield made the Galois home.
yes, that's true. That's true. Provided shelter. So, but it's absolutely gorgeous now, and it has some of its own stories. I think the one I know the best is that there's supposed to be a little boy there.
Hmm.
I've never really heard or found who they really think he is. I think there's an urban legend that he somehow tragically died there, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's factual or not. I've never been able to track that down.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the base is. I do think it's maybe a little bit of a cautionary tale when you go into these historic structures, built before modern day coding, multi-floor structures with large balconies and overhangs and deep, obvious places that you could plummet to your death. And
Yes,
the railings are oftentimes very short.
short and not always very sturdy either, especially if they haven't been restored.
No, I'm like, there's been a few times I'm like, yeah. I I promise not to drink in this location. That would be bad. The the I think to a certain degree, we could almost call the Galois, sort of a, if not certainly not the only crown jewel theater on Old Route 66, but it may actually be the heart of Route 66, because Route 66 began in Springfield as a
Yeah.
concept, and M.E. Gillois, Mr. Gillois, for whom the theater is named after, was the builder. He was actually a construction and bridge builder,
Right.
and because of his ties to Missouri State construction projects, he found out, he was privy to the Route 66 plans before the public, and that guided his decision to build the Galois Theater with some unique construction, both in terms of how it faces Route 66, but also just the construction itself. He built, and this is something to me that I love, and then is also heartbreaking, and then I love it. And the Galois, for M.E. Galois, the building was meant to be a movie palace that would last the ages.
Mm-hmm.
And he built it like that. He built it like a bridge.
Yeah.
The fact that it sustained for, I mean, it, with, in some cases, with very little care. Once you got into the latter part of the 20th century until the restoration, it basically was not being cared for.
Yeah.
And the thing is just solid as a rock. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's beautiful on the inside, but just the idea, to me, I mean, we are in this current era where everything practically is disposable. I mean,
Yeah.
inkjet printer disposable, TV disposable, laptop disposable, strip mall disposable, and just this, I would say, a 19th century industrial American mindset that had wedded was not about convenience, and had wedded the idea of industrial construction with craftsmanship, and the idea that this building that we're creating is going to last in this, utilized for this purpose for centuries, is just, it's a level of craftsmanship we do not see today.
No, no. But it's that kind of craftsmanship that allows some of these buildings to still be with us.
Yes, and I'm so grateful. I have a thing for historic structures.
Mm-hmm.
I
Same here.
I my whole life, I mean, one some of my favorite places to go as a child were and are some of these historic structures. As a little kid, one of my favorite places to play was Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine. Of course, the old Spanish fortress in St. Augustine. I've been to Appomattox. There a ton of different locations. I love just walking in those spaces. They are part of the bedrock of our culture. They are part of the American experience. They tell us so much about our past, and it is I can't, I know that human beings are more valuable than locations. I realize that, but oh, I don't think that oftentimes we understand how much our culture, how much these locations are crucial to our culture, because they help us understand the past, therefore giving us perspective on the present.
And often, if people do get that sense, it's after they've been torn down, and then you see so many people. Oh, do you remember such and such?
Yes.
Or even, I've heard of this building. Where was it? And um, sort of the old cautionary tale of not knowing what you have until it's gone.
Until it's gone. And and there's layers and there's layers. I mean, and it and sometimes, I mean, my current house here in Hollister is, I mean, I kind of, ultimately I took all the stuff that was important to me over my entire life and I put it in the house. So it's kind of a shrine to everything that I think is important, including, if he's watching, he'll get a kick out effect, including like cardboard airplanes that my nephew made me.
Oh,
But
cool.
it is, he's 12 and he's a World War II buff, and I'm so proud of him. And he makes me,
awesome.
yeah, we're digressing, but he makes me tanks too. So.
Oh, that's so cool.
and and I told him the story of riverboats, so he made me a Confederate gunboat, a Mississippi gunboat.
Like
it is it's hot glue, cardboard, and tinfoil. So
hey, you did a good job.
he really did. Oh, and here's the monitor.
Awesome.
So we're well represented on all sides. But the I really it's kind of heartbreaking to me, even though I'm grateful for this location. But this used to be a family farm. The development that I'm on used to be a family farm, and and I know that there's kids that used to play and in this space, and I don't know who they are, and that to me is also heartbreaking. But the the Gilloys, if you get a chance, and of course the Gilloys is open regularly. I'm not sure what their schedule is right at the moment with everything going on. But under normal circumstances, the Gilloys has regular shows, and I got to see Eli Young Band there several years ago, and they do have a really cool ghost story that has been documented. In New Year's Eve 1962, the projectionist died of a heart attack, essentially at the stroke of midnight.
Oh, wow. how how Dickensing.
it really is, but with a very 1960s twist. So New Year's Eve 1962, the projectionist was Martin Kirchner, and he was the longtime projectionist. That he had been the projectionist for many years, and he was they'd had a big New Year's Eve bash, and then the stroke of midnight they were supposed to kick off a film, and of course as the projectionist he was the one who was supposed to kick it off, and then it didn't. The film didn't start because
Right.
he had died. Perhaps ironically, I don't know, the film was actually called From Ballet to Burlesque. And bear in mind, midnight showing 1962. You guys can fill in the plot.
So is there a rumor that he haunts the building, or?
There is. I don't know, but I certainly don't know. But I do know that there's some there's some key elements there. Martin Kirchner was obviously an individual who had invested so much of himself into the building,
Mm-hmm.
and had for many years. So if it is, I think if it is a haunting, it's certainly the implication anyway from the information that I have is that it would not be a malevolent one. This is an individual who had invested his life into the structure, and I would hope that he's happy seeing the building restored and lovingly cared for at this point.
I would assume so. I think I've heard over the years that people have heard of baby crying there, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
again, going back to supposedly a baby falling out of the balcony or something, but I'm not sure that has ever been documented.
Yeah, I I am not sure either, but it's an incredible place. Chandeliers are not as impressive as the Coleman. The Coleman takes the cake
No.
for chandeliers. I love the interior. I love the interior of both. Something I love about the Gilloys is that the interior is sort of an Egyptian Art Deco.
Yeah. I love that style, and it's something you don't see all the time. So it's very unique.
No. And and the idea, again, coming back to craftsmanship to last the generations, as opposed to disposable. You go into a modern movie theater. No offense against modern movie theaters, but I mean it's very like the oldest, most retro it's going to get is 1997.
Right.
It's and we all know that these locations are built for, for value. They're built with a disposability and a replaceability in mind. And then it is a consequently, and of course, having grown up in some of those spaces, not all, but growing up in Illinois, we do have a 1920s era theater that I got to see most of my childhood movies in. So I'm grateful about that. But just sort of that disposability of space. And then, you go into, we'll just pick the Galois as an example, and you have, hand carved faces on plaster, and you have hand carved, high quality wood flowers, embedded in the ceiling and ensconced in this sort of, Dutch Renaissance style. And it's a level of detail and a level of craftsmanship that it is surreal.
Well, and that's the thing is, I highly recommend people seeking out some of these places because it's a unique experience that you don't get any other place.
And and even just comparing Coleman with Galois, these are, comparatively speaking, in the larger scheme of things, they're not even that far apart.
No.
Distance wise, they were built about the same time, and they're nothing alike in terms of craftsmanship. I mean, the craftsmanship on both is exquisite and mind-blowing, but they don't look remotely alike. I mean, as you mentioned, the Coleman, you walk inside the Coleman and it's a inspired by Versailles.
Mm-hmm.
You walk into the Galois, and like I said, it's an Egyptian Art Deco. You're like, where did they get the idea for these? Are incredible. It's like, oh my gosh, I could just talk forever about what it's like. I totally geek out about this stuff.
Well, style was very present in the minds in that time too, so I think that's part of that.
Absolutely. The modern theaters that I go into, I'm just, mildly excited that they actually like have little lights to show me where to stop.
Yeah, so you don't fall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
which again, safety is a plus. But
how about we go a few blocks from the Galois and we talk about the Landers?
Oh yes, let's do that. The Landers Theater is one that I really don't know a lot about because I've not written an article on it.
Right. The Landers, well, now it's the home of the Little Theater, the Springfield Little Theater. It's on Walnut Street in the historic district. And it's certainly not as ostentatious as the Galois, but it was it's actually older, and I want to say that it was built around the turn of the century,
1909.
1909.
And that's
Okay.
only thanks to Google. I didn't actually know that.
I figured it was. I was close. I knew it was about that time period, but it does have a unique, not unique, but a pretty compelling haunting. It is said to be haunted by a janitor who perished in the theater during a catastrophic fire in 1920.
Wow.
And he is, people have described seeing his figure, seeing him, go through seemingly routine things, sweeping or that kind of thing, that he's still taking care of the theater.
That's neat.
But I find it is interesting, that it comes out of fire.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of times those kind of events seem to imprint themselves in a space, and my guess, he worked there. I'm not sure exactly how long, but it was a place he was connected to, and certainly out of a very tragic event. And so, if anyone's interested in Little Theater, I do recommend that they go there.
Yeah.
It's a neat building, but I haven't been there in a long time. But it's well worth it, and you might see the janitor there. I guess we could go on down. Well, you want to talk about the other Springfield location? Well, how about we hop to Poplar Bluff?
Yes, yes. And this is a new bit of information also for me.
Right, right. And it's the Rogers Theater in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, over in southeastern Missouri, which is still in the Ozarks.
Yes.
And I've heard stories of the building for years, and not long ago, someone who actually works there in the building contacted me and started talking about it. And it was built around 1930, so it's kind of the same time period as the Galloy and the Coleman. It's kind of more of a Art Nouveau.
Neat.
And but they have some some interesting things that happen there, and ironically centered on former janitor as well. People will see a janitor, and he's usually wearing blue overalls.
Very
And
wow.
right, and another interesting thing that happens is that faucets get turned on in the building, and it's a very sort of impressive activity, but it's not unique. That running water water often is connected with hauntings. People don't think about that, but
This is true.
a number of locations will have water spontaneously turn on, that kind of thing.
Right.
Another example that I'm familiar with is in my area down around Joplin is the old Prosperity Schoolhouse, and it stood empty for a very long time. Then they turned it into a bed and breakfast, and during that time period, they often would have problems with faucets being turned on in the building, even when no one was in a room. Even a room no one was staying in, and they go in, and water would be running out of the bathtub, and guests would report that the water turned on by itself, that kind of thing. So it's certainly not unique there, but that happens. And so it's just a neat place. But the history is what I found really interesting with it.
It
is that it sits on land that before the theater, it was a boarding house. And in 1927, that house was used as triage after a pretty significant tornado went through, and the tornado had killed over 100 people in just a couple of minutes, apparently. And so, so that was ground zero, basically, and this is one of the closest structures. They used it for triage. It's also 2 blocks away from the Black River, and I know there you'd have drownings and things like that. I've read about that area in the past, and also a block away from the courthouse and where the gallows once stood.
And you yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, that's something that people often don't understand or realize, is that for most of the history of this country, people were executed in the county where they were convicted, and sentenced to death. It was
Right.
only in the late 1920s and early 30s that we started deciding maybe we shouldn't do this here. We'll do it at the penitentiary. Because to be frank, again, they were used as cautionary tales. People would come out and have picnics and bring the kids, and there's lots of stories of, saying, when I, my parents took me to watch this hanging when I was 6, and I sat on my dad's shoulders and that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A cautionary tale / picnic. It's like, it's like the exorcism plus fried chicken.
Oh, yes. That's another story for another day.
It is. It really is. But I think that there's something. This is something I've talked a lot about in some of my other portions of my life. But as Americans, we have become, there's so many things that we've become desensitized to, predominantly through mass media. But something that we have become extremely sensitive about is the reality of death. Death has been made to be very polite and
Sanitized.
very sanitized, very cordoned off. Death happens when people are not around. We do not see corpses as a general rule. Everything has become very very polite, very sanitized, and I can understand that. I understand the argument of that. Of course, my first introduction to the fact that things might have been different was simply listening to traditional bluegrass, and every other person had died tragically, young, middle-aged, all. Death is a constant companion of traditional bluegrass. And I was like, yikes, what is going on? And then I realized it was a constant companion of their lives.
Yes.
And that's why, because of course we sing about what impacts us. And I think, while I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable signing off on the Roman carnival of, hey, let's go down to the the Saturday afternoon hanging, I do think that our sanitization of death has brought us to a point of simply death is an alien concept to people. And I think that there's some very unfortunately severe and potentially negative effects on society about that.
One, I think it has become an abstraction
Yes.
to many people.
And it's very easy to start devaluing or simply not valuing the lives that we have, because we don't realize that they could go away.
Exactly. And just while you were telling that, it made me think of a situation and this was a conversation I was having with the director of a cemetery a few years ago, and subject came up about a particular house, and he was describing it, and it's Victorian. You've got the front door, wraparound porch, you've got the other door, and he made the comment, I don't understand what that other door is. And I just said offhand, well, it's the death door. And his eyes got really big. He goes, what? And I was like, this is a guy who deals with death. And I said, well, that was the death door because you went in that door for the viewing of the body. And he says, what do you mean? And I said, well, because the body would be laid out in the parlor.
Yeah.
And here, this is someone I thought would be one probably ought to, and this was not a very young person either. He was quite a bit older than me. And so I thought, well, if there's anyone that should have a concept of how death was handled, it would be someone that handles death. But what I said was totally
True.
alien, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and it, it reminds me, for people that follow me, I post videos regularly from Smyrna, the church that I'm a member of and have been for a long time. But one of our, this has been in the last 12 months, I think. Time gets away from me. But one of our longstanding matriarchs, who was in her 90s, passed away, and rather her wishes was for her funeral to be held in the church, and rather than at the funeral home. And it's a little bit more of a laborious process, since it's
Right.
not all just conveniently set up, and there are some small stairs and more narrow doors and that sort of thing. But I felt like it was a very beautiful and very honoring and very cathartic experience
Mhm.
to have that. And honestly, as a deacon there, it was an honor to be there.
Well, that's true, and it's another example of how things are desanitized or more sanitized. It's at
Yes,
at a funeral home, even if it's in a, because a lot of funeral homes are in old buildings or Victorian homes or anything. It's
true.
still everything's set apart, and
It
that's
is.
something that, and I think that's one of the things that, getting back to our theaters, is that theaters often are, there's a lot of haunted theaters, and that idea of the theater being haunted goes back centuries. And well, the tradition of the ghost light's a good example. And a lot
Yeah.
of people don't know about ghost lights, but traditional theaters keep a light burning 24/7, and they call it the ghost light. And it's for the performers who have passed on, who may come through.
Yes.
And so, again, it's honoring that and just acknowledging that this happens, which I find
Yes.
very interesting. Did you want
It
to talk?
is. And
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
I didn't know if you wanted to
I was
mention
just
the
going to say,
Owen.
yeah, well, with a little bit of time left, we'll talk about the Owen. And one of the things that our conversations have landed on over and over, liminal spaces, threshold spaces, crossroads. These seem to have not only importance in this plane, but they seem to have a great deal of importance in that next plane, or that next dimension. And I've wondered the energy that's created, not just a lot of emotional energy output, but the act of acting, of
Mhm.
pouring yourself out in a performance that takes people into another space. And that's what great theater does, that it not only invites people, but it projects them into differing spaces, that the utilization of that experience may in and of itself make a theater a liminal space.
I think that's fair to say. I really do. And you know, I've seen it even in places that aren't necessarily theaters or performing theaters anymore, like the old Opera House in Carthage, Missouri is a good example. And in fact, from time to time, people see what they believe are performers there,
Yeah.
and it's for whatever reason. I think it's, as you said, I think it's something about that process of acting or dancing, or that transformation. It's almost a transformation.
And you see, and ultimately the the more puritanical of our society that took issue with these elements of circus and theater. Circus is another,
Yes.
these elements of theater. And they, not saying that I agree with them, but they may have had a point, that there was something of larger significant being sort of, you know, of energy being churned up, or energy being transmogrified in some way, that there was something happening that was more than the sum of the parts. And then from a sterile uh future point, looking back, going, oh, you silly people, I don't know why you would have been upset about that. I'm not. I'm love cinema, I love movies, I love all that stuff, I love pop culture. I'm not saying I agree, and I've been the last person in the world to ever censor anything, but I do think that there may have been an outpouring of energy that people, although they found it unsettling, they may have recognized a magic of sorts that we today aren't even recognizing.
I think that that may be true. I mean, I I think in some ways that process of performing takes on a life of its own.
Hmm. It does.
And
It
and
does. It is an embodiment.
exactly. And it that way it perhaps does live on in a sense beyond the performers leaving.
Yes, and and the curtains closing and the lights coming down.
Exactly.
It's those are, and to me, those are very poignant moments, especially when the performance is powerful, and then it's done, and there's a very bittersweet quality to that. And the space that at one point was completely packed with energy is then suddenly echoey and empty.
Well, and one thing that we talk about, on the flip side, when I'm uh, wearing my paranormal research hat, is that energy does not go away. You cannot destroy energy. So that energy, something happens
Right.
to it. And so if you have a surge of energy, whether it's from the 1927 tornado in Poplar Bluff killing people, or
Yes.
energy created by the minds. I mean, actually,
Yes.
a subject for certainly another day, but there's a entire catalog of hauntings and activity that are associated with mind thoughts, thought forms
Wow.
that basically the that we can create a poltergeist or some sort of we can conjure something that interacts in the environment through the mind.
Yes.
I mean, literally think of, if you're familiar with the Hebrew golem,
Yes.
think of a golem created by the mind.
Hmm. That's an
That would be,
incredible concept.
yeah, I mean, that's basically a thought form. And so perhaps theater in itself is a bit of that process. It perhaps it creates its own thought form.
Yes,
Okay.
and I think that's
So I
very
really went out
realistic.
there on that tangent, but
No, I appreciate it, and I think, you know, for folks who are watching, listening in, or watching later, as Lisa and I continue, we've continued to develop our concepts and our development for Dark Ozarks. This is basically our off the cuff. We have bullet points. We do not have notes. We occasionally look stuff up. A lot of times we literally do just wing it if it's something that we have a lot of experience about. But it's a process where we are developing and thinking through. I think we're both. I'm definitely a verbal processor in terms of how I approach things, and we're really just sort of creating this as we go, and invite, from the comfort of our own locations, and then just inviting everybody else to join in and watch.
yes, I mean, and it is a bit of behind the scenes of sort of the brainstorming and segments of putting pieces together towards writing that and we get to talk about things that may not end up in an episode on TV, but so you get more information than you'll get from the TV show, actually.
Absolutely. And at some point we can put this on the extended DVD features or something. Owen Theater briefly is right next to the link to the video game that I don't use. But the Owen Theater is a theater, actually the oldest theater in Branson. It's in downtown Branson. It's a comparatively small theater. It was built by Jim Owen in 1936, and Jim was, speaking of energy, a larger than life person. He ultimately, for a period of time, I believe he was mayor of Branson, and he was a beloved character and person, both physically and emotionally. I think energetically a larger than life person, and he was a brilliant marketer. He owned the Jim Owen float trips and was instrumental in wrangling the A-list stars of Hollywood of the era to come to the White River to float on the float trips. And of course, the float trips were practically 5-star affairs. They would go from location to location, starting on the James River down the White, stop, and individuals would be there to prepare meals for them and overnight, accommodations, and all. It was a big deal. Well, Jim built the Owen Theater. He named it after himself, Jim Owen. And that is just an important side note. A lot of people, and I think I'm sure I've been guilty of it as well, call it the Owens Theater, sounding like it ends with an S, and it's not. It is the Owen Theater, named after Jim Owen. Is it haunted? I don't officially know. I do have some really good solid contacts of individuals who have reported voices, disembodied footsteps, some of the lighting in the theater moving on its own. There is some talk about Rose O'Neal haunting the location, although my research on Rose O'Neal does not suggest that to me. She's not buried anywhere near around at that location, and I'm sure she saw shows there, but she also bought cigars regularly from the corner drugstore, which is currently, I think, the Walgreens or the CVS in downtown. There were a lot of places that she frequented, so it seemed to me personally that seems like a little bit of a stretch, but it is a beautiful space, and it has one or two remaining S.E. Bates murals on the wall. S.E. Bates was an artist who spent some time in Branson and later moved to Eureka Springs. She and her husband founded an art colony in Eureka in the 1950s, and she, for a period of time, is sort of that 1950s jet era, late 50s, early 60s jet era. Her jewelry, which she combined fired ceramic with metalworking jewelry, became essentially all the rage in Manhattan in the late 50s. So for a period of time, her pieces were sought after. And back in the 30s, she was the one that was in there painting the walls of the Owen Theater.
That's pretty cool. What are the subjects of the murals?
They are landscapes.
Landscapes.
They're landscapes, ostensibly landscapes featuring the White River. I think that would be fair to say. And they're river tree and mountain scenes. And knowing Jim Owen's love for the White River. The fact that he owned it, owned the structure, that is my guess. And of course, Jim Owen was devastated with the building of Table Rock Dam, and the inundating of the river that he loved.
Well, I mean, that's certainly, I can understand, and he built a business around the river too. And so, but describing, voices and footsteps and so forth, I think a lot of theaters have that kind of almost residual activity that perhaps, even if there's not an active, interactive or intelligent presence there, it's as if some things just replay themselves from the past.
Yes. Yes. And
it sounds like maybe that's kind of what's going on, perhaps, from those accounts.
It would make sense. I've not experienced anything myself in the location, but regardless, it is a beautiful location. And again, when things, progress a little bit further, we'll be able to see shows there again.
That would be neat. That will be neat.
So we're going to be. What's that?
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, we do need to mention, I guess. Yes.
I was going to say we will be on Instagram on Wednesday at 7 Central East 8.
No,
What's
we
that?
won't. No,
we won't. I forgot. I was on autopilot. Belay that order. Yeah. What are we doing?
Yeah. Normally we would be, but we are actually recording a radio show that we'll be guests on, and we will Wednesday, so we won't be on Instagram this time.
Correct.
So we'll be back over here on Friday.
On Friday, yes, right here on Facebook, and I think we probably just plan for some Instagram posts in regards to what we're doing on Wednesday, so you all can be watching that.
That's I think we'll do that, and I think that'll cover it, and hopefully it'll be interesting.
I think it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
It will be.
Looking forward to it.
We'll have fun with that. So if anyone has anything that they would like us to talk about on Friday, let us know.
Yes.
And,
absolutely.
And everyone have a good week.
Oh, yes. Yes. Be safe, be sane, be focused, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, Josh.
Night, y'all.